Thanks, David. I hope everyone can see the screen okay. So we're talking about solving staff shortages, whether that's now or next year. Like David said, this is going to be a bigger and bigger challenge, even if you're not already facing it. So what I do, I work at Flat Planet, which is outsourcing to the Philippines. And the big theme of the whole day today and the whole event is both anticipation and adaptation. So I'm going to be talking about that in regards to staffing. So to start with, who am I? What's my background? I grew up in Melbourne. I studied commerce. I thought I was going to be an accountant. So I did that briefly in Melbourne before realizing it wasn't quite what I wanted. And I decided to pack up and move abroad, have a bit of an adventure. So on all of those photos, I'm actually in the Philippines. So grew up in Melbourne, born and raised here, but spent half a decade living and working in the Philippines. So me on one of the great islands in the Philippines, me in the middle in our Manila office at Flat Planet. Several years ago, and then me on the far right giving a talk at a HR conference. And then I relocated back after a great 4 or 5 years in Manila, living and working there, helping Australian businesses and entrepreneurs to access great talent. I came back and now I'm focused on the client-facing side rather than the operational side, but still in the industry and helping people. So what is Flat Planet? So again, a virtual talent or outsourcing company. We've got 300 staff now across Malaysia, Vietnam and the Philippines is our main hub and where we started. And again, a selection of a group photo of some of our staff there. So what are some of the headlines? If you peel back all of the COVID related news, and if you still read the business paper and the business press, you likely would have heard a lot of these sort of headlines. And these are quotes from articles that I've seen about a great resignation, employees offering free flights and massive gift cards, skills crunch, staff wanting massive pay increases, and just again across industry, across sector, people struggling to find the people they need. One accounting firm I was speaking to, one of their top staff got poached with a $30,000 signing bonus. So not just a pay increase, but a $30,000 signing bonus. Other recruiters, if any of you are in the recruitment space or are talking to recruiters, hearing about massive amounts of people, they've got a great candidate, they've got the role lined up, but then at the last minute, the company counter offers and keeps them because that's how tightly people are holding on to good staff. And other people that it may be just trying to advertise directly and get staff are finding roles are going unfilled and they're just not able to get who they need. So this big skills crunch is really coming and hitting people. So before we jump into it, I just wanted everyone, again, hopefully webcam's on and people are watching, if you can just put both your hands up in the air if you've ever outsourced to the Philippines before. Keep your hands up if you've ever used staff in the Philippines, maybe directly, indirectly, through a service provider, something like that. Okay, I just want you to keep your hands up if it's been a positive experience, if you've had a good experience with your offshore engagement and it's worked well for you. Okay, excellent. So again, the key problem that many are facing, I'm hearing every day someone talking about staff shortages, not a word we used to hear in all the years I've sort of been in outsourcing. It was always other factors driving, but right now this is the key factor that's driving it, finding, keeping great talent and great people in your business. So it's a bit of a negative sort of start in some ways, talking about these challenges, talking about how hard it is to get and keep people, talking about how competitive the market is. But like all things in life, a lot of it is sort of the mindset you take. And every problem is also an opportunity. So a great little quote here from Winston Churchill about seeing the opportunity in every problem instead of the problem in every opportunity. We all know people, even when things are great, they still nitpick, and other people, no matter what comes to them, they're able to find ways to turn that around and make the most of it. And that's what I would encourage you to do, to see, here's a challenge. There's a shortage of staff, we're struggling, but what's the opportunity? What are new ways that we can leverage what we've got and what's out there? And as David said, so much has changed recently to actually make the most of it. So the world is flat. So not a flat earth. Some people might have heard the flat earthers on YouTube or on TV or other funny places. And some people ask me, am I a flat earther? I say no. A big difference between a flat planet and a flat earth. So the world is flat was actually the title of a book in 2005 by Thomas Friedman. And it was about outsourcing. It was about globalization. It was about the massive change in factors. And Chris Moriarty, the CEO and founder of Flat Planet, actually named Flat Planet, the company, that I work for after the book, The World is Flat, in 2009 when he started the company. So inspired by that book, and he saw the trends. And again, like a lot of authors at the time, it's not fully sort of understood the trends, but then 10, 15 years on, like now, everyone looks back and it seems obvious. But back then it was quite revolutionary to be talking about that because it was only a small amount of people benefiting. And so what does that mean, you might ask? The world's flat. Okay, I get it. There's a name, it's memorable, it's sort of catchy, but what it means is a level playing field of opportunity, that we're not limited by geography anymore. We don't have to physically travel to places in order to engage with people right now. We're not all in David's office or in a hotel or in an event space. We're on Zoom. We're in different cities, maybe even different countries around Australia. And that means that we can all access this great knowledge, and there's many other things we can access. So why doesn't everyone sort of access it? Technology's there. The hardest thing I would say is habit change. E-commerce has been around for a long time as a similar example. You can buy things online, whether it's groceries, people buy furniture, white goods, mattresses, all sorts of things can be bought online, big ticket, expensive items. So we've got this great communication technology. The hard part is the habit change. Everyone's one click away. All these icons are familiar. You can Zoom call, you can Slack message, you can Google Hangout, you can WhatsApp friends and family. But the hard thing is the habit change. So there's e-commerce, which again, in the recent 2 years had a massive surge, but still a lot of people, the habit of going to the shops, the habit of wanting to touch a piece of clothing before they buy it, the habit of wanting to physically see a fridge before they buy it is still there. And likewise for staffing, the habit of wanting to physically interview someone in person, of wanting someone to sit in your office is still there, even though these great technologies are one click away. One person I was speaking to, they're running a sort of a private equity venture capital fund in Brisbane, and they couldn't get good accountants. And I was talking to them about some of the great work we did for private equity firms and venture capital firms, even large family offices, and the huge amount of accounting back office we did for them, and similar companies, and all the great teams and accounts payable and all these great things we were doing. And the CFO got it, but the CEO, who was a bit older and it had been a bit more traditional, actually decided, rather than looking at offshore staffing and solutions, actually paid someone to relocate from New Zealand to work in his Brisbane office. So he understood the benefit of people outside Brisbane. He couldn't get what he needed in Brisbane, but rather than use these one-click technologies to communicate, actually, recruited and paid for the relocation and physically move that person who's now in their office. And if they weren't in Brisbane, if they were in Melbourne and Sydney, it might have been a different story. But that goes to show, like I said, even the technology is there, you still have to be willing to use it because old habits die hard. So encountering that a little bit, I would say it's actually a lot more common than people think. Outsourcing. I go to a lot of business networking events in person and on Zoom, and a lot of people I talk to, about half the room, usually on average, will have outsourced, whether it's to the Philippines, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Vietnam. About half the room will have some sort of experience with offshore staff. So it's a lot more common than you think. And especially now, more and more, it started with a lot of call center work, but more and more it's actually back office functions, IT, finance, administration, things like that. And in those sort of roles, you don't actually know. If you engage a company, it's a great experience. You don't know that their bookkeeping, maybe their administration, maybe their database management, maybe their graphic design is actually being done remotely. You wouldn't actually know when you engage with them because the people aren't in customer-facing roles. So I'd say the reason everyone hasn't done it, like I said, often behavioral change and habits that take time to change, but also that it is actually more common than you would think. So getting a bit more granular, there are 4 specific barriers I want to sort of talk through, which might apply to you or other people in your business. Maybe you're talking to your business partner about it. Maybe you're trying to think through, again, staffing strategies for next year, and really trying to think of what's the mindset. We're talking about a staffing shortage, and which there, is, if you think in terms of the local market. There's no shortage of people in the world. There's great talent all over the world. It's really the only shortage is if your view or your look or your catchment, whether you're recruiting or sourcing, is in your local area within commuting distance of your office, or even within your city, or maybe even within the country. That's where you might see a shortage. But when you open the search to a larger pool, that's when you'll find there's no shortage of great people. It's only sort of, again, a mindset. And that's what the mindset shift I'm helping to sort of hopefully create today. So the first barriers, your employees are all currently perfect. No issues with staffing, utilization. If everyone can just raise up 2 hands if all your employees are perfect. There's no challenges, no issues. Everything's 100%. No sort of challenges. Okay, so not many hands going up. So not many people staff are perfect. And if you're a sole trader, I would ask you the same question again. Are you making the exact amount of money that you want and working the exact amount of hours that you want? Often, again, I would say if you're the only staff member in your own business, that means, again, your staffing isn't perfect. Maybe you're overworked and you need to be able to delegate some work, or maybe you don't have the marketing support to grow your business and you're not overworked, but you're not earning the amount of revenue and business growth that you want. Or again, maybe if your staffing situation is very good, I would say, again, it's not just a skills shortage. Again, the theme, the Great Resignation, is one that's trending around in the business press a lot. So I think a lot of staff, as things open up, or if they haven't already, some people are reevaluating their careers, their lifestyle, their location. So you might have a great team, and I hope you do, but over time, again, there's a lot of people being headhunted, a lot of people changing career paths, leaving, moving companies, seeing what else is out there, hearing about these great bonuses and offers, and thinking, well, I can actually, get a much better offer. Or again, some people just deciding maybe to focus on family or other things in their life. So there's a lot of liquidity in the market of people moving and jumping around. I know early in COVID, I think last year especially, a lot of people were nervous to change because you don't want to leave it, even if it's a sort of a bit of an insecure job. You don't want to leave that because you don't know what's on the other side, and companies were making layoffs. So people are still a bit nervous. But as things open up, people realize that, maybe there's greener pastures for them, or maybe again they're not worried about jumping into a new boat, and then the new boat they jump onto doesn't do well in the storm. So the next barrier is people have never thought about it before. So everyone as well, again, if you can just raise two hands, if you've never considered outsourcing offshore in your business before ever, it's never come up, you've never thought of it, if you can just raise both hands. Yeah, so some people have, some people haven't. So I find this sort of varies a lot by industry. Anyone who's worked in a large multinational corporate is often familiar. Maybe you worked for a US headquartered company, a UK headquartered company. You're often familiar with having conference calls with colleagues in different locations. Maybe you all flew to one location once or twice a year. Again, maybe you flew around yourself for different clients. And the big end of the corporate world, global multinationals, it's very common to interact with staff. They might have a shared service center in the Philippines or somewhere else. So people who have worked in big multinationals are very familiar with it. Certain industries as well tend to be early adopters, like e-commerce businesses who are always sort of very fast. Software development was always very fast on the trend. But 8 to 10 years ago, when I was starting in this industry, if you told me that today I would be providing marketing support for a number of chiropractors, as well as support for medical manufacturers, working with other manufacturing businesses, working with even tradies, sole prop tradies and electrical contractors, again for admin, finance, customer service, working with individual coaches and consultants to expand their marketing, their reach, their administration. I wouldn't have really expected that, both sole traders and also industries you wouldn't traditionally think would be interested or open-minded to accessing offshore staff. So the scope of companies has diversified massively outside of finance, telco, insurance, technology firms, to even mid-market and smaller businesses, as well as industries like the trades and construction and property, where you wouldn't really think. Again, there's a big in-person element to a chiropractor, a tradie, but the actual back office requirements, the marketing is more extensive, more online, more advanced, and that's where they're often coming to us for support. So the third barrier, a lot of people are nervous and they don't know where to start. So again, if everyone's can put two hands up, if you've thought about it, but you're a bit nervous and you don't know where to begin with outsourcing, you're not sure how it would work in your business. Again, very common. So people, again, maybe you worked at a big company that had offshore staff, maybe a friend of yours who runs a business has offshore staff, and you've thought about it, but or you see someone with a great team and a great operation, you think, yeah, but how did they begin? Like now they've got 10 staff doing all their customer support, sales support. They've got a team of 3 great finance support people. Maybe they've got, again, a whole digital marketing operation. You think, wow, where do you begin? How do you get to that stage? Or they might have talked through some of the challenges in getting set up. And, or some, maybe you're nervous about the security. Some industries are very high security. We work with a cybersecurity software company. And again, very high security clearances, very tightly provisioned hardware, software, firewall security. And our IT team matches that level of security. of our clients, as well as a big private equity company we work with doing some fund accounting. Again, very high security, very confidential information. A lot of people are nervous, but the digital cyber security, physical security, all those sort of controls have improved so much in recent years that we're able to guarantee, essentially the same security as if the computer was inside their own network, and so was the staff. So the final barrier, again, the last time I'll ask everyone to raise their hands, if you've tried outsourcing and it hasn't really lived up to your expectations. If you've tried and it's failed, you can just raise both your hands if that's something you've given a go. Okay, so again, some people, they're open-minded, they got over their initial nerves to start, but then what they found was it didn't live up to their expectations. Some of this could be that they were an early adopter, and like some entrepreneurs and business owners are, they love novelty, they love new things. So maybe a decade ago when the industry was a lot younger and a lot newer, that they gave it a go, but it didn't quite meet their expectations. And because of that, they wrote it off and said, well, never again, and it's not right for me. Maybe they picked the wrong location within the country. Maybe they picked the wrong country. Maybe they picked the wrong partner. Maybe there were, again, cultural, language, time zone, quality control, productivity issues, a whole bunch of reasons. And obviously it's a big market like any sort of industry. So I can't speak to everyone else's experience, but definitely there are some people that rush in. They even, sometimes when we talk to them about the strategy and the ideal circumstances, but then they go off and do something different. And again, not to say it's right or wrong, but just it doesn't always work. And there are a lot of complexities and subtleties that you want to get right. So it works really well, but there are subtleties that are easy to overlook if you sort of rush in. So you might have thought, okay, I fit into one of those categories. I recognize those barriers. I'm still at those stage. What's different now? Why would I sort of consider it now? I thought about it before. Again, it's one of those things, maybe it's just in the back of your mind, or you hear about it. Or like I said, every second business owner is doing it. But, I hear about it because this is the industry I'm in. So people often open up to me and chat about their sort of offshore staff. But if you weren't in that industry, you probably wouldn't hear about it. Just like I wouldn't hear about someone's, tax or contract issues because I'm not an accountant or a lawyer. So again, the nature of what I do, it's sort of, I see how common it is when other people might not. So three key reasons I want to say on what is different now. What's changed, especially in the last 2 years, specifically with COVID. So there's massive consolidation in the outsourcing, or some people call it the business process outsourcing industry. There used to always be a lot of sort of fly-by-night companies who would set up, get an office, hire a few staff, they'd come, and again, they would sometimes burn the reputation of the industry because they're sort of easy come, easy go. Someone flies to the Philippines and sets up a company. A lot of those players have honestly been wiped out during COVID. So we've been around for 10 plus years, like I said, 300 staff, really stayed steady and even grew during COVID, while a lot of other people were packing up and leaving. Like I said, Chris and his wife, that co-owners of the business, have been in the Philippines for a decade after they moved from Sydney. So they're in it for the long haul. They're very stable. So a lot of those sort of small time operators have been wiped out. And even at the big end of town where there's different challenges, there's been massive consolidation. So I would argue the overall quality of the entire industry has lifted massively because a lot of the lower quality providers have been sort of washed out. So a second big fact is there's what's called an overseas Filipino worker, OFWs. So about 10% of the Philippines population was living and working overseas. In Australia, in the US, in the Middle East, and the amount of high-tier talent has actually come back to the Philippines in the same way a lot of Australian expats have repatriated to Australia. Is just massive. We've hired a quantity surveyor for a large property development company in Queensland doing tender responses, who had a decade plus experience in the Middle East on massive builds, $5 to $25 million projects. We've been able to hire that person to work for an Australian development company, again, providing much higher level service and focus and being able to win, a huge amount of tenders and new business. I was recently interviewing a candidate who spent a decade at Gulf Air in Kuwait in a sales support role, and again, was putting them as a candidate for a business. So these high tier talent, obviously the talent's already in the business and in the country, but ones who used to leave are now sort of coming back. Or another example, not people who have been overseas, but just, recently hired someone who was in a technical support at Salesforce to be the Salesforce administrator at a company. And for that same client, who's a mid-market software business, was able to hire an ex-Amazon data analytics person to do their data and marketing analytics. Again, top talent from, major tech companies like Salesforce and Amazon. So that sort of talent has really changed. And the third and final thing, which I'm sure Tom will talk about, is the technology's improved. Again, everyone's got Zoom, people are familiar with it. Cloud, file storage, sharing, all those sort of technologies have changed a huge amount. So again, I would ask you to, expand your gaze, expand your mind in terms of talent. If you're not finding who you need, whether it's to support yourself as a small business owner, whether you've got a team, whether it's to, you're losing team members and you need to backfill, whether you want to expand, there's things you wish you could do, but you don't have the budget or the capabilities at the moment to provide those services or support yourself or free up your own time, whether it's an executive assistant, sales support. I would say, expand your mind, even that ourselves. That's why we expanded from not just the Philippines to Malaysia and Vietnam as well, to really expand the catchment of talent we're able to bring into our clients' businesses. So just wrapping up. So again, assuming your staff aren't all perfect or your current setup with yourself and whoever's in your business isn't 100% perfect and you're not 100% happy with it, I'd say there's two other alternate pathways you can take. So the first one is, you're ready to have a chat. You're interested. You like what I've said. Maybe you've been thinking about it or stewing on it for a while. Maybe you've dabbled in it, but you want to see what else is out there. I'd like in the chat box below to type the word call. If you're open-minded to having just a chat, hearing what our clients are doing, hearing what other people are doing in your industry, hearing what type of roles work, what don't, hearing about different engagement models, full-time, part-time, casual, just type the word call in the chat box below. Otherwise, you're curious, maybe you're not sure, it's still a bit new, you think maybe I'm too small, maybe I'm in the wrong industry, maybe I'm too big, maybe it doesn't work, what about this, what about that? You're kind of just curious, but you don't want to have a call because, again, you still want to do a bit more research, which is completely fine. Then I just ask you in the chat box below to type the word info, and I'll send you some videos, some articles, some links, and some info just so you can research on your own. And then, like I said, happy for you to leave it in your court and for you to come back to me in the future once you've done a bit of extra research. And that's it from me. Thanks everyone so much for your time. And I'll hand it back over.